our top 20 best of films from not because we missed the beginning or end of the year for 2022, but for the Oscars cycle. How clever are we, eh? We did from 20 to 11, and now we're going to pick up from 10 to 1. Can you remember who went first last time, Tim?
I went first last time.
Well, you go first again then. Number 10, please.
All right. My number 10, Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris.
Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. Not one I've seen.
I love this movie. Partly it's because I have like a soft spot. Now, I don't have like a nice wardrobe. I wear like jeans and t-shirts, but I have a lot of interest and respect for bespoke fashion. So I like this woman, the working class woman, like saving up and getting this Dior dress. It was just such a great time. And I have a lot of interest in these old fashion houses. So that was kind of cool. And then the costuming is so good and her transition, her evolution. It was a very, very lovely movie. A nice time at the theater. You should see this, Matt. Give it a watch. It's a very sweet movie.
I've got cupboards of clothes that don't fit me, like literally cupboards and cupboards. And now all I've got is like 3 tracksuits underneath the bed. I rotate. And not even good ones because I refuse to spend the money on fat clothes. I bought a suit for a wedding that didn't even fit me. I had to do the fly halfway up and then fold over. And then I tried breakdancing at the end of the night, and my trousers fell down because they weren't even belted. What a dickhead, eh? Anyway, who was in that one? Who was Mrs. Harris?
Mrs. Harris, Leslie Manville.
I don't know her. What else has she been in?
So she's been in the movies since the mid 80s. She was in Maleficent. Yeah. She's in Phantom Thread. She plays the business partner's sister to Daniel Day-Lewis. That was a great movie. You've seen that, Phantom Thread?
I don't think I've seen a single Daniel Day-Lewis film.
Yeah, that was Daniel Day-Lewis's last movie. Paul Thomas Anderson. It's also about, he plays a designer. That was great, and she's very good in it. So yeah, I have seen her before. I just didn't know it.
The thing that puts me off about Daniel Day-Lewis, I know he does the whole character actor thing, is no one ever does it for a nice role. No one's abundantly nice. They only have a character act when they're playing an absolute cunt. With him, every clip of him I've seen is exhausting to watch. In the pit of his stomach, getting either angry or something's being oppressed with every sinew of his being. I drink your milkshake.
Yeah, there will be blood, Robert Pattinson said something similar. People only use the method when they're playing an asshole.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
My number 10, Tim.
Yeah, let's have it.
Right. This is going to probably be the most controversial pick on both of the top 20s. But this film is, and I think you'll know straight away from when I say this, it stayed with me like a film has for a time that I can't remember the last one. Maybe it was Paranormal Activity. Maybe it was The Ring. Art the Clown is one of the literally terrifying that when I go to bed at night, I go downstairs now and check that the front door's locked. When I fall asleep with my back to the bedroom door, I don't sleep easy. Terrifier 2, it was made by fledgling production house Bloody Disgusting. Lauren Lavera is the central protagonist, and David Howard Thornton plays Art the Clown. Now, the first film was criticised for not having any story arc. It was basically fumbling in the dark and waiting for the kill. So Damien Leone took it to heart. What I liked about this is it felt sincerely 80s. The heavy synth soundtrack, the edge of comedy, and 80s horror films weren't shy about making female leads a hero because they didn't have the hubris of the male characters. Lauren Lavera is absolutely brilliant. A little bit of side boob in a shower scene is all we needed. Where this differs from the first film, the escalation of depraved kill scenes, and sometimes they're not even kill scenes, sometimes prolonging the torture. Every cut's deeper, every cut's longer last. The way that David Howard Thornton plays Art, he really adopts the mime persona, and there's something about that just makes it all the more sinister and menacing. Like the way the child catcher in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang was actually a professional ballerina from Russia. They wanted someone that was nimble and light on the feet to give it that creepy, can't see him coming, ghostly, wistly presence. You don't feel like there's a man behind it. You do genuinely think that Art the Clown is something that exists within that realm.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
It fucked me up, mate. Fucked me up. because I still get scared in the dark, you know. Like sometimes when I close my eyes, I don't mean like a proper phobia, not like just being a bit of a pussy hole. But
Okay.
sometimes at night when I close my eyes, whatever hormone that being terrified is, whenever I close my eyes, I feel like I need to open them again. Quite brutal, actually. When you're in your 40s, you just rationalize it. No, it's fine. Your body's just out of sync a little bit at the minute. If you get to sleep, then it will go away and you'll wake up in the morning. The first couple of nights when I was upstairs in my bed and I was thinking, God, imagine if he was sitting downstairs just on the sofa. You know, like how he's eerily still, almost giving an opportunity for his next victim to escape. But
Yeah.
it's, you know, they're not going to, but that sort of slow, patient, in waiting. And that's the worst, we've said before, that's the worst thing. Sometimes
Yes.
there's the one where you can't see round the corner. It's set at Halloween, it could just be a stink costume.
Right.
Somebody that's overplaying the role. And it also shows how accepting and willing to give a chance people are to start with. Because if that motherfucker turns up with a plastic bag, a bin bag clanking, it's a funny, you're slamming the door shut, you're locking the windows, you're running upstairs, the bed's against the wall, and I'm screaming out the window. I'm
Yeah.
not waiting for him to come back and knock for the third time, trick or treat.
The costume design's so good in that too. Like that is a fucking scary looking character.
It is
Setting
well.
aside like what he does. Ugh.
And the final scene is actually not too dissimilar to the end of Men.
Yeah, horrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say the only thing that took me out of the film every time is I know how weak those bin bags are, that you can't even put the recycled plastics in glass without something poking out the edge, like a pizza box that's spread. And it's got like saws and hammers in a garbage ban.
Yeah.
He's not going 5 meters before the bottom falls out of it. At least
Right.
double bag, you fucking pervert.
Oh my God.
Oh. All right, so that's Terrifier 2. Tim, over to yours for number 9, please.
I'm gonna go with Pearl, number 9. I have it in my top 10 in contrast with X, which I also quite liked because it would have been easy to do a prequel that had a similar tone or a similar style than as does X, but the tone and style are completely different. Unless you knew, you would not know that this is connected at all. And I thought it was like the rare origin story that really works and is deeply compelling. A wash in primary colors, and it gives you like a sense of a certain amount of sympathy for Pearl, the ultimate antagonist in Act. Mia Goth is so great.
She's great, isn't she?
Yeah. Have you seen it?
I haven't, no.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of like on your to read stack, trades or comics or whatever it is. There's always one that's about the midpoint. It's never at the
Hmm.
bottom, but there's always something that gets put on top of it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that contrast in filming styles is even more poignant because they actually shot them back to back. And
Yeah, exactly.
and the trailer Pearl was actually the post-credit scene of X,
Yeah. Yeah.
which a lot of
Right.
people didn't even realize when the trailer was released online. It had actually been available for 8 months or 6 months at that point.
Totally. The flexibility of the vision was just really impressive. I think it's a really nice franchise. Like, I hope they keep going with it to a certain point. There's always that fine line, like, okay, how many of these are you going to do? Like, at what point does it sort of jump the shark? But I think at this point, it's dialed in. Really, really enjoyed it.
There's a sequel coming, isn't there? It was always planned as a trilogy.
Yeah. Yeah. And she is a budding star. She's a very good actor.
Knowing that the X-Men are just over the hill,
Yeah.
could she possibly be a rogue?
Totally.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. She'd be great. Yeah, that's a good one. I would recommend. All right, you're number 9.
Yeah. Okay. This one's gonna be, I think, a fairly obvious choice for at least for my top 10. From Netflix, it's All Quiet on the Western Front.
Mm.
First time it's been adapted in its native German language, and it shows the story of a group of young German men who were swept up in the excitement of the war effort in World War One, falling foul of propaganda and nationalism. They join the war effort, and then they're on the front lines within a couple of weeks. And then the dastardly cruel nature of war becomes more than apparent, and they wonder what it is in actual fact they've been tricked into joining. You are clearly watching Nazi troops, but what it does well is allows you to be sympathetic that really there was no winners in that war.
9 million soldiers in combat, 23 million wounded, 5 million civilians died as a result of.
Almost inconsequential slaughter of generation. And the fact that it wasn't learnt from, and we still had a Second World War, which was still ground troops, just throwing endlessly young men into live fire. It's, you can't, the tragedy of war is always felt. The powerful thing about this is that you are sympathizing with Nazis. The hardest thing you can ever do in a film, make you sympathize with Nazis.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe a racist. Nazis, Nazis
Yeah.
Nazis and racists are the two things that should be nigh on impossible to humanize, but this did. But you're not sympathizing with them as Nazis, you're sympathizing them as young men that have been cruelly swept into a war effort, the churn of bodies. The one thing this showed that I've not seen in, at least I can't recall seeing in another film, it's when the German soldier, like this is just like me or you being given an axe and a bayonet and a rifle. And then in 2 weeks' time, we're engaging in hand-to-hand combat, having to stab somebody to death with a fucking axe. In 2 weeks. It shows the profound effect on the young German infantryman as he tries to save the life of the Allied soldier that he's just butchered to save his own life. He's like trying to stop the bleeding, he's trying to apply pressure, and then he just lies next to him and just uncontrollably sobs. It's, yeah. Go on then, you're number 9.
All right,
no,
let's do.
Yeah, you're number 8, I should say.
All right, my number 8, we've talked about it already. Vengeance.
Okay, cool.
BJ Novak film. So anyone who wants to, we did a whole conversation about that in our last episode, but I just love this movie because I thought the performances were so good. It's the rare piece of cultural analysis that is a little bit ahead of its time in a way. The true crime podcast and all that, the critique of that, I thought it was great. And he's so funny. It's a very, very clever movie too. Oh yeah, we talked about it.
It was his like passion project as well, wasn't it? He put the whole thing together. I think BJ.
Yeah, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
So, what's your number 8?
My number 8 is the film that saved the movies all the way back to, I don't know, when did what am I doing? Let me start that again. My number 8 is the film that saved the movies, and funnily enough, that we'd be talking about Tom Cruise, because of course it is Top Gun Maverick. This is how you do a recall. This is how you play on nostalgia. This is how you give people exactly what they want without it making them feel sick. Have we already talked about this one?
I think we did previously. I think we did a show on this.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. I think so. I mean, who knows? I mean, it's not like we were there, all right.
Well, it's hard to remember like what we talked about here and what we talked about elsewhere, you know?
Yeah, it's very true. Because really, for me and you, this is just basically a phone call, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
But it's not been on your list before now. It wasn't
no,
on
and
your
I
list
have it on
already.
my list. I've got it at some point here too.
What do you say about this that hasn't already been said, really? I mean, the 300 hours of aerial... I thought somebody knocked on the door then. That's obviously Art the Clown.
Shit!
No, don't do that. It's like those little moments when you do hear a little knock before your adult mind takes back over and you're like, oh shit. Oh no, don't worry. It's just a film. But you know how I got over it? I thought, well, if Art the Clown's real, then Lauren Lavera can also be real, and she'll be the next one through the door, so I can deal with it. Do you know what I mean? I get like the sexy girl with the angel wings is like a 2 for 1. It'd be worth it, mate. Cut me up, but just give me 5 minutes. That's all I ask. Obviously, it'd be voluntary. I wouldn't like force myself on it. Like that ain't what I'm saying. It. This is a completely fictional thing whereby ghosts and monsters are real.
yeah, of course. No, I get you.
Yeah, and in this perversion of fantasy, then yeah, I would say, give me 5 minutes. We'll hold hands, smoke cigarettes, and then you can get on with it, mate.
Yeah.
Of course, the joke would be on him because I would have romanced her sufficiently for her to defend my honor and my head. But yeah, back to the point. Top Gun Maverick. There are scenes in this. There's one specific scene whereby there's aerial combat. This dogfight, one of the planes almost goes vertically in the air and just comes to a complete stop. I felt myself almost coming out of my seat at the cinema.
Mm-hmm.
Holy shit!
Yeah, it was great.
Without it being 3D, which you can never imagine Tom Cruise ever being a part of, the sequences were so visceral. The verisimilitude of every bank, of every turn. That's what you get from actually filming it.
Yeah, in a vacuum, I can see how I would not love a film of this style because it can be kind of saccharine at times, a little bit sentimental, but somehow it pulls it off. Like you're saying earlier, its style of callback is so on point. The sentimental elements play in with the original so well. When you temper that against the flight scenes and the true action, like the true peril of the action scenes, just comes off so great. I love that movie.
And also, what I think's been missed a lot with this is nobody was asking for this film. There wasn't existing sentiment for a Top Gun sequel. It was very much put on us. The film you never knew you needed.
Totally.
And then you watched it. Wow.
Yeah.
It's a shame that Kelly McGinnis basically got so fat she wasn't allowed in this. And then what annoyed me is she bemoaned the fact that Hollywood doesn't cast the people that look like me. Yeah, but guess how you got the original role? There were fat cunts that were probably better actors back in the day, and you got it because you were sexy.
Yeah.
If you want that to be the rule, then you're not even having this conversation now.
Granted, that was like 40 years ago.
Time takes its toll, Tim. Amazing that we are so energetic and handsome at this point. It's a miracle.
It's amazing we found each other. Two beautiful men on the internet. Just
I know. You know, that's Grinder, isn't it? You put yourself in hot water by even approaching that, because if you go, but seriously, we're not gays, then you're like, what? No, there'd be anything wrong with that. Well, I'm a heterosexual male, so to me, it is actually unappealing. A good old-fashioned buns of willies, not on the table. I don't care how fucking politically correct you are, because if I've learned anything about heterosexuality, if I'm not peer pressuring my missus into a threesome, then I ain't fucking.
Oh shit!
Apparently, that's fine to say no to a threesome, but the second I say I don't want to be, right. Do you have anything to add to Top Gun Maverick, Tim?
No, I'll reveal it when it comes on my list. But yeah, let's move forward.
Okie dokie. Number 7.
Bodies, bodies, bodies.
Yes.
Oh, I love this one. We did a segment in an earlier show, and this was, I think, your number 11. Is that right?
It was my number 11, yeah. So canny.
Oh, I know. It just does Gen Z so well. And like you said last week, it invites you in as an observer. It's inviting. It doesn't put you off or make fun of you. There are characters that are avatars for us, like that, like the Lee Pace character. It's very inviting and like almost like educational, didactic in some ways, but in a good way.
Impressively, it doesn't make it like the joke's on us for not understanding it, but it also doesn't make the subjects the jokes. They're all dislikable, and somehow you still have intrigue into the characters. So that takes me to number 7.
Sure does.
Now, this was a departure for the auteur director, who had wrath of stylistic art house horrors on A24 already. I love The Lighthouse, Willem Dafoe and Patterson were just supreme. So to see Robert Eggers take on something like The Northman, it just excited me. And I was excited by it. It combined the fantastical of the age with the visceral brutality, and intentionally so as well. You weren't supposed to like anybody in this film. Sure, you had protagonists, but at the same time, there was nobody really that comes out of this film with any merit whatsoever. Like, it's just a series of nasty people. And when you say people, I think it clouds the fact that it's not somebody that's causing a ruckus in a workplace. This is Norse mythology, wretchedness of that time. You can just be collecting the eggs, boiling the water, and then out of nowhere, you have this fucking gargantuan rabble of men raping, pillaging, locking children in a straw and wood hut and setting it alight, taking the spoils of the berserk. It's
Yeah.
you could almost smell it.
Yeah, and I even thought some of that came off in the characterization, like the Anna Taylor-Joy character. I can't remember
Yes,
what her
yes,
name is. I felt both sympathetic for her, but I
you're
couldn't
right,
tell whether
actually.
she was also evil. She's both a victim and potentially a monster as well. And I thought I loved that. You could have those feelings about a character simultaneously.
It lets you know very quickly in the opening exchanges where they're on their canoe or a kayak or something, a father and son net fishing at the side of the water, and they just kill them and then laugh. They put an
Yeah,
arrow. First of all, they shoot the son, and then as the shock of it's coming to the father, he turns around and he gets an arrow.
yeah,
Splendidly horrific.
yeah, totally. Totally. Completely amoral. And it had the perfect dab of magical realism. It's like there's a reality to the and a viscerality to the violence, like you're saying, the day to day. And then they tie it in with something supernatural or something of the bizarre. And I love those little touches. It's not an outright fantasy movie at all. I
No,
mean,
no.
it's grounded in a film reality, certainly, but it had those pieces of the supernatural that I loved. And it really culminates in that final battle. I thought it was awesome.
So you're number six.
My number six is The Northman. So there you
Okay,
go.
cool.
Yeah.
And my number six, Tim, is now what we've come to learn in Elseworlds in the DCU. It was, of course, Matt Reeves. The Batman, Robert Pattinson adopted the persona of both Bruce Wayne and the taciturn, stoic nature of this young Batman. Because like we've talked about with score, like it's a connoisseurist thing whereby people who like to pertain to have knowledge about films, they go, "Oh, and the score was fantastic." Like, because who's going to fucking
Mhm.
disagree with you? Like, what are you going to do? Go, no, it was flat. It should have been in this pitch. Like, no one knows enough about. No one knows enough
Yeah.
about composing.
Yeah.
True classic, not classic. Well, most of the time it is classical, but just a piece of music that isn't a song. Like, who's going to
Yeah.
say it's good or bad? I know some of them are iconic, and obviously you go back through John Williams in Superman and Raiders of the Lost Ark and all that sort of shit. Like some of them were just iconic, but really
Mhm.
that's more like a little ditty, isn't it? It's not really what we've come to know with what people talk about, like Hans Zimmer, like where it's the score from the whole thing, or like my
Mhm.
favorite Max Richter. But that's the whole thing again. Like people always go to Hans Zimmer, and it's like, well, all right then, but tell me one that isn't the most obvious, and then tell me how much you like film scores. Well, I don't know
Yeah.
anybody else.
Tell me why you like it. It can't be like I like the sound of it. It sounds
Yeah,
good to me.
yeah,
That's not.
exactly. However, in the Batman, there is something that this film would not be the same without its sound engineering. It very much makes the city and blunt instruments like the Batmobile come alive. The first scene when you see the Batmobile, there's something animalistic about it. It's grunting, it's growling, ready to pounce. Do you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
that was through everything.
Yeah.
I feel like I went right around the houses with that one, Tim. But with the power editing, it's going to sound just fine. Good grief. I mean, I didn't feel that passionately about it. And to everybody else, it's going to seem like I wasn't. But trust me, that went on long ting. And yeah, everybody in this, everyone in the Batman was great. The only criticism I had of it was one act too long. The capture
Big
of
time.
The capture of the Riddler was too easy, even though you felt it had to be Machiavellian, which it ended up being. The end of it seemed to set up No Man's Land. I mean, I think there's like 4 omnibuses for No Man's Land. It was that big a Batman event. So Gotham City's basically plunged underwater. Batman's trying to take back the city. And this is how you know it was completely unnecessary because my dad, he loves his films, but he just watches them at face value. If they excite him, they excite him. That's not to say there's anything wrong with just liking things on face value because he takes the same enjoyment out of it. In actual fact, he takes more enjoyment out of more films than I do. So
Sure.
fair play to him. He said, I knew it wouldn't end there because it's a superhero film. We needed the fight at the end. Oh, right. Yeah, it was that obvious, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
That to me is what kind of left it off my list entirely. It is too long.
It
It
is
is
too long.
also narratively an act too long.
Yeah.
And I found the conclusion anticlimactic for those
It was,
reasons.
yeah, anticlimactic,
Um,
that's for sure.
but I can't fault the performances at all. I thought Paul Dano was good. Robert Pattinson's one of our great actors. It looked great, yeah, and it sounded great. So
And
yeah,
I think what I liked about it the most was it was a Batman film. They were very sparing of Bruce Wayne, and I like that.
and it was a detective film,
Yeah,
so
100%.
that was great. That was good too.
Good stuff. Number 5, please, Tim.
I went with X, number 5.
Nice.
I separated them because I thought they're so tonally different. You've seen X?
I've seen X, yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah. It looked like a 70s film. I thought it was bold in having them shooting like porn films in this barn.
Yeah, yeah.
And I felt like some degree of sympathy for Pearl. She's basically been neglected, and she just needs like some love. I felt like somewhat sympathetic towards her, even though she's also a monster. There's a lot of tension to it. Even scenes where nothing's going to happen, like that scene, that shot from the drone up top where Mia Goth gets into the water and there's the alligator chasing after her. She just barely gets out. I was on the edge of my seat, even though I know they're not going to kill her off. But it was very exciting to watch.
There's not many new stories to tell, but it's how you tell them. This was very classic. There's nowhere to turn. The only way to escape the peril is to confront it head on, go through.
Yeah.
It's just done in a really smart way.
And completely entertaining. The perfect amount of pastiche.
And let's not forget Jen Ortega was in it. That whole scene where her boyfriend's filming it and she's just been brought along for the ride and she was like, oh, I want to do a scene. And he was like, no, that isn't what I volunteered myself for. Like at the end of, have you seen Zola?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's like the final scene of that where the kid, because his immediate environment is so contrary to common sense, that in that environment, he's the contrarian because everybody else is of low moral prestige. As the viewer, it makes you so tense and on edge. And it's very much the same because she's still prostituting herself, isn't she? And she's telling him that he's not going to do it anymore. And he's like, I'm going to fucking kill myself. I'm going to jump off the balcony. Then they're all going, yeah, go on then. Do it, you fucking faggot. Do it. And then he
fucking
just runs,
does it.
and they don't call an ambulance. They pick him up and put him in a car. And it's just horrendous to watch. And you felt that same anguish for the poor cameraman
I know.
in Air.
Yeah.
It's just horrific.
Yeah. Putting yourself in the position of the cameraman. Oh my God, this is just like an intolerable fucking moment. And then the thing is, she turns it all around on him. She's like, I thought you said this was real art. It's not just a porn film. It's like real filming. He's like, I have no response to that. There's that practical where the main guy, the camera kid, storms out and then the main guy goes after him, basically is like, dude, this is happening one way or another. You may as well get on board so you can film it so that you could be basically the director. One way or another, this is happening. And he finally comes to the conclusion that, practically speaking, he's fucked.
Because you can't think of anything worse though, can you?
No, I mean, it's like truly like, one of the,
It's why it works as a film because it's not purely the tension stack of The Killer in the Woods.
Completely. You, the audience, are by that scene are as caught off guard as he is by it. Like, what the fuck? Did you just say? It's like, holy shit.
She's a quiet little mouse for most of it, isn't she?
Yeah. I thought it was awesome.
A quiet little squeaker. Beep, 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 beep. Eating cheese. Number 5.
All right. Number 5.
Let's give a brief introduction about the general list. I'm not what I would consider a fan of horror films. Heavily troped, built on depreciating returns. However, on both our lists, I know we said this at the beginning of the last episode. Well, at least I think I probably stumbled through it. That the richness and the variance of the quality of horror films that have been out in the last 12 months in this Oscars cycle, no less, is quite astonishing. If you'd have said to me, you're going to make a best of list of any year, a quarter of it is horror films, I would have been astonished. I would have been in disbelief. Nay, I would have called you a liar.
Yeah.
But yet here we are. So, my number 5, it is Barbarian.
Nice.
The film was The Monster in the Dark, what's behind the next door kind of shit. Very traditional. A lot of the themes and premises that we used in the early zombie films. You keep going through the doors until one's locked and then you have to turn and face the danger that is in front of you. And that's kind of the premise of this. However, it's a very honest appraisal of social norms and social misgivings, in the same way that not every liberal is a blue-haired whale, in the same that not every conservative is an Indian headpiece wearing fucking racist. Do you know what I mean? And with this film at the beginning, it sets up a man and a woman who have never met before. They're unfamiliar, and it's weighing up who can be trusted. And of course, we know that there's an element of, it's a horrific film. So we're expecting there to be some danger somewhere. It sets up adversary between two people that are really actually quite nice.
Yeah.
And all they're trying to do is make the best of the situation. And the horrific themes and expectations are kind of vis-a-vis for the horrific expectations of what could happen when you encounter a stranger.
Totally.
You're never certain of the man's intentions. Is it Alex Skarsgård in this case?
It's the Pennywise, whatever.
Yeah, Alexander Skarsgård. Yeah, Alexander Skarsgård. The thing is, even as a man, I'm distrusting the man.
Totally.
And even when he's screaming help from the depths of the subterranean lair, you think he's just luring her in.
Totally.
And it's not until he literally has his head bashed in that you're like, oh, he was just a nice dude. He literally didn't want her going out in the dark. He literally just fancied having, look, he was probably trying to get his willy wet, but he did just want to have a glass of wine with the attractive young lady. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally, completely. Part of the genius of that, the promotional campaign, part of it is the casting. It's just so many layers to making that tension believable for you to really feel it. The first 25 minutes of that movie are basically perfect.
Yeah, absolutely perfect.
Yeah. I love that movie. It's on my list too. Boy, I know we did do a segment on this. There's so much you could say about this movie. It's so innovative.
I can't speak for women, and nor will I try to. However, I'm about to try to. But when I watch Promising Young Woman, I always hark back to this. It's in the way that it leads you to inspect your own activity. And it wasn't really a conversation that was being had at the time. And it makes you inspect yourself and question yourself. Now, what answers you come up with are entirely down to how honest you are with yourself and actually your past action. But it made me ask myself those questions. This maybe is the antithesis of this as a woman watching it, that not every man's out to get you.
It's interesting when you bring up Promising Young Woman. A character we haven't talked about in this was the Justin Long character, the guy who owns the house. He is a Me Too monster. The question is, you always have it in the back of your head when he returns to the house, could he be redeemed? Could he be heroic in this case?
Yeah.
And in fact, he just turns out to be the complete asshole that he always was. It's so good.
But again, this film made me question my own, I won't say prejudices, because that's a fucking wishy-washy word. Oh, okay, let's say prejudices. Things like Me Too, they have to go too far in the other way before they recoil and find the medium where we need to be. With this, I was sympathetic to Justin Lang's character. Is it Lang or Long?
Long.
Justin Long's character. I bet it's one of those, two people were out, they probably had a couple of drinks, maybe the circumstances have changed in hindsight. And I was kind of like, I hope he's innocent. It turns out when he admits to it, to his friend when they're speaking drunkenly, he goes, yeah, but did you? He goes, well, you know me, Holmes, or whatever. Shit. Actually, I've fallen into the trap of being sympathetic to somebody that didn't deserve my sympathy from my personal bias. All right, prove it to me, and that sort of shit. And then I was like, oh no, they've pointed out something about me in the film, but I'm not in the film, but it's about me again.
Yeah, the movie is brilliant in building, in realizing the narrative tension. It depends upon the expectations, not just of narrative that you bring into the film, but of social norms in society. It's so good.
It is a horror film, so there is going to be tension, the physical tension of the action, of the inaction, of the unable to act. But then again, on top of that, we're trying to deal with where's that coming from?
Totally.
Because you don't know if it's a monster film until the
Yeah.
very second you see the monster. The only criticism I'll have in this in hindsight is the old dude. You think that he's trouble in the opening scenes, like pushing the trolley around and he's, don't go in there, it's nothing but bad.
Yeah.
He could have just called the police, couldn't he, from the first instance? Get to a phone. It only comes out at night. You need to get out of there, or whatever. At the same time, it's a thoroughly well-maintained house. Have not previous people been there and been there at night? And what happens every night? Does it just come out and just have a bit of a nobble?
If you're the old guy and you know that crazy things happen here, surely someone would have reported a missing Airbnb tenant in the past.
The door had to be opened from one side, didn't it?
Mhm.
Like the string to open it. Were people just not that curious? And in that case, how did the monster exist? The child of much incest. How did it survive down there? There's a lot of practical inspection that you probably don't need to make, but it is one of those afterwards when you think, huh.
Yeah.
But let's not make any mistakes, Tim. It's the 5th best film of the year, according to me.
I also love it.
Is it on your list?
Oh, yeah.
Is it higher?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he's got a fucking twinkle in his eyes, isn't he?
Oh, man. All right. So my number 4, a movie we've already talked about. My number 4, Top Gun Maverick.
Now, my top 4, I think, are going to be unique. Oh, no. 3 of my top 4 are going to be unique. And 3 of them are quite niche choices. I think Tim probably could tell you 3 of them now. So, number 4 is a single take film. It's about a chef that set up his own restaurant, Stephen Graham, and he is encountering the problems of a Friday night peak service time. And he's dealing with problems with the staff. He's dealing with personal problems. He's dealing with bad actors. And the film is called Boiling Point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, despite the implausibility of everything like this happening in one shift, from working in the hospitality industry as a young man, as a teenager, having waited on, having worked in the kitchens and that sort of shit, this is actually very realistic portrayal of how chaotic, how pressured, how at boiling point every service is.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's fighting the waiters and the waitresses are fighting the chefs. The managers are fighting everybody. The wine service, they have it fucking easy. That's it. They have one job.
Sommeliers are just like,
people are falling out. They're arguing. They're fighting for their courses. Why isn't mine ready yet? I'm getting shit off the customers because basically we're doing silver service waiting. We've got dicky bows on, but we're fucking 16-year-olds and it's our first job. The people in the restaurant are basically looking for silver service with bow ties. That ain't us because we're getting paid minimum fucking wage. Not only that, but it's a man that you see him on the phone at the very beginning and he's having trouble with his ex-wife and he's promising that he'll be there and he didn't mean to let her down. And it's not clear whether it's, maybe his daughter or it's maybe his ex-wife that he promised to help, something like that. But you can see that he's a deeply troubled man. Progresses. And why this works, what was the other film? 1915, 1914, 1916. What was it? 1906?
1917.
1917. As the other film, 1917, which I remember absolutely every time, progresses, it kind of gets in the way of actually telling the story. What Boiling Point does perfectly is it uses it to the kinetically frantic nature of a peak time service. Every time somebody passes somebody else, the camera follows their part of the story, and then somebody else comes out the back maybe, and the film like latches onto them. It's almost like the film's got a magnet, and every time it goes past somebody, it tells their part of the story. And the way it does that just shows you, like I said, how frantic peak service is. There are some absolutely touching and maybe unnecessarily added parts, but all the character arts are perfect. They're all fully rendered. It's a large cast. It's a short film. I think it's only about 90 minutes long, which is preposterous that that's a short film these days. And it's heartfelt and it's emotionally detailed. And at times it's heartbreaking. And it's one of those where you're constantly just touching the side of your eye. And as you see Stephen Graham's character spiral out of control, you always suspect it's not water in his water bottle. At one point, he sends the kitchen porter to empty the bins. And it's clever the way it sets the expectations as well, because he's outside and you think he's just binning off his work, smoking a fag, and he's on his phone. And then a car pulls up and he goes to the window and gets something out of the car. And then obviously he takes that back to Stephen Graham. And at the end, there's this. Yeah, have you seen it, Tim?
Nope.
I won't tell you the end scene, but it's painful when the destructive nature of addiction, and that you can be a high performing addict. You can run a restaurant and you can be well paid and people can depend on you. But at the same time, you can have this crippling anxiety about the day-to-day survival, either with or without fulfilling the addiction. It's hard to do without it seeming either cliched. This shows again how destructive it is, first of all, well, it doesn't show it all the way through the film, but by the end, it shows you how destructive it is to him, how much it's hurting him, and how much he's just keeping up appearances. Everybody knows, but nobody wants to say it because for what use would it be?
Yeah.
But the supporting cast as well. There's one moment, I won't say it because I know with all the rest of the films we've been gone into it in quite detail, but I know this isn't one that many people would have seen. But there's one specific scene with a young boy who's like the apprentice to maybe I think it's like the sous chef or maybe something like that. And there's a heartbreaking scene. The lady who's mentoring him falling apart. She's falling apart, and the young man just stands there. He doesn't know what to do, paralyzed with emotion. But she's going, look, we can't do this now, but when the shift's finished, I'm going to talk to you and I'm going to give you a big hug and we're going to help you and we're going to get you through. Absolutely hard. It's like an ugly crying moment. And she just hugs him and she goes, now get on. Come on, people are depending on this.
Wow.
But yeah, it's like a beautifully tragic. Oh my God, I've just noticed how long Tim's eyelashes are. They look perfectly maintained. Not that I put
a lot of time into
claims. Yeah, such heinous claims onto such a wonderful gentleman. But if that's what he wanted to do to make him look that good, then who am I to stop him? Number 3, Tim.
Number 3, we've talked about it. Cyrano.
Oh,
I love it. I love it.
I love it. What you can't see, listeners, is how happy our faces were when he said the word. We both went immediately ear to ear and looked lovingly into each other's finely mascaraed eyes.
Well, the thing is, like, no one talks about this movie.
Nobody talks about it.
It just came and went.
Yeah. I would even suggest it didn't come. It just went.
Yeah. Well, we talked about it last week, but I truly love it.
Do you know what the annoying thing is, though? You get like the Fabelmans that also underperform drastically, and nobody's saying it's a good film. And that's, again, it goes back to what we said in the previous episode that it's not in the previous episode, it'll be in the succeeding episode when we go through all the Oscar categories that we've already taken. After you've looked at 1 or 2 categories, it all just feels very, very familiar. Elvis didn't need to be in everything. Fabelmans didn't need to be in everything. All Quiet on the Western Front, probably more of the technical side of it than maybe adapted screenplay I could have gone for, but I don't know. I mean, I've got it 9. How many are they allowed? 10 films, aren't they, in the best picture? So things like Cyrano, it should have been in best. So
hell yeah, no question there.
Yeah.
Dinklage. Yeah, what can you say?
I feel like I've stolen your thunder consistently here. I feel like a lot of the coincidental films in both of our lists, I think I've pipped you to the post by one almost every time.
No, it's okay. I mean, I've gotten my piece out on these. So
okay.
Yeah.
Number 3. Don't know what else there is to say about this. It's an indie film that has just rocketed into the zeitgeist. I don't need to probably say too much more about it. Banshees of Inisherin.
This is my number 2.
I'm almost kind of out of words for Banshees of Inisherin. We spoke about it a lot, even if it wasn't on the air. And what else is there to say at this point? I mean, just fantastic performances through and through. And technically behind the camera, all accented as opposed to prominent. And it was those accents, almost fantastical premise that made it work. Like the sincerity that ran through the film, even though
sincerity. That's a great word for this. One of the things that was so compelling about this was Colin Farrell's character. The movie starts off so depressing and tragic in a way, and he maintains hope throughout nearly the entire movie. Even after the fingers start getting cut off, he still maintains hope that the relationship can be salvaged. And you as the audience slowly, patiently come to realize that's not going to happen. And the sympathy that you feel for him when you, the audience, know it's not going to work, but he still holds hope is so great. when he finally recognizes it and suffers his own tragedy, it gets extremely dark. The patience of the movie pays that off tenfold.
And Kerry Condon's a big part of that.
Oh, she's so good.
I couldn't work it out for a good part of this film. It's Iron suit. It's Friday.
Mm.
I don't think that's a good idea, Tony. You won't survive. You need to come back down immediately. Yeah, thank you, it's Friday, but I need to be a bit more positive on this one. Because when I looked at my IMDb to find out like who she was, I was flicking through it. She's like the most watched actress or actor I probably have on it because she's made like 7 MCU appearances.
That's so funny.
Isn't it funny?
Yeah.
I mean, off-putting at the time. She's the commonsensical POV in the film.
We haven't talked about Barry Keoghan.
I was literally about to say that.
Yeah.
He is that one scene when he's asking if she could love him.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just beautifully sad.
Yes, totally heartbreaking for both of them.
Film achieves what it achieves is it always pairs conflicting emotional sets together. Colin Farrell's character is, of course, the one that's been hard done by, but then his optimism is the catalyst for all the tragedy. Actually,
yes,
pairing tragedy with optimism. In the same way of that scene, you have an obviously dim-witted moment because his character isn't particularly likable. It wouldn't really want him to end up with your sister because of how he behaved previously in the film, but it manages to pair that with actually a quite warm and tender moment.
Yeah, that's great. That's great analysis.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, no, totally. I'm actually writing that down. I just took a note on that.
Well, I wouldn't have got there if you hadn't led me there, mate.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Yeah, I love this movie. I really do. It could have been number one. You got to just make some decisions.
When you make lists like this, they're so important to you in that moment. I've got to get it right. I can't let one of the 10 people that'll hear this.
We can't let Brussels down. Unbelievable.
So, is it my number 2? It's not a film without controversy for Andrea Riseborough's inclusion in the Best Actress list. One that was in Tet, and one was in The Woman King.
Viola Davis.
Yeah, Viola Davis. Here's the thing that annoys me about the narrative about, okay, by the way, the film is To Leslie. And the thing that I find reprehensible about the whole controversy is that, first of all, we have Michelle Williams, who did next to fuck all in The Fabelmans, and she should have been supporting actress, but they didn't think she stood a chance in that, so they promoted her to Best Actress. Mm-hmm. It's just one of the curiosities about nomination process that I'll never understand. The second one is we have Ana de Armas, who apparently she performed well in Blonde, but to be honest, if she wasn't on the list, it wouldn't be a problem. The thing that annoys me is the targeted, Oscars so white brigade that are targeting Andrea Riseborough. I will guarantee you 99% of those cunts haven't seen the film. Fucking guarantee you that. And also, because it's the independent film, the multi-million-dollar campaign that it will be, that would be more than the budget of To Leslie, that is excluded by proxy from not having the amount of money, thinks outside the box. It's a brilliant film, and make no mistakes, it's a brilliant performance. So for Andrea Riseborough to be caught up in interviews, it's deeply affected her that her nomination is seen as a race problem. Why are we assuming that she's the 6th nominee or the 5th nominee? Why are we assuming that those 2 black actresses were the 5th and 6th? They did a guerrilla campaign through... Okay, so it's Michael Morris is the director, and it's his film. His wife is a bit of a bigwig on the studio stage. She's friendly with some big Hollywood actresses, like Kate Winslet's one of them. So there was a guerrilla campaign on Twitter to say, this is a great film, you should all watch it. And it was trying to sway people the frequency by which this would be mentioned on social media. Why wouldn't anybody do that? The Oscars are so old money, SAG is so old money, that because they haven't gone the traditional route of bombarding it with money, with the fancy parties and the long campaign for your consideration, it's unfair because that's not how it's done. That's the age we're living in.
Yeah.
So it's incredibly unfair to the film. It's incredibly unfair to Michael Morris. It's incredibly unfair to Andrea Riseborough because we should be talking about an actress, a working actress. She is now put in the role of her career and it's been tarnished. She has every right and should have been nominated in this. I've never seen addiction. I've never seen the destructive nature of alcoholism being paid so accurately. And it's not scared to go to some truly horrible, uncomfortable scenes to watch. It shows its destructiveness, first of all, to Andrew Riseborough. And then it shows the destructive nature of the people around it. It also shows that sometimes you need an external agent to bring them back round. And you said earlier, the way that Mark Maron plays his role, he's more sympathetic. He almost allows her to take it at her own pace, but I'll be here for you when you need me. And there's this timid, fragile, developing romance between the two. But you don't know if Mark Maron, if that's really what it is, or is he just somebody that wants to help somebody out? And then there was no point where you questioned that this isn't a Southern lady, and it's an English actor. The consistency of the tone of the ways that she speaks. What I love is when actresses aren't afraid to get ugly. Because it's not wearing makeup and having a nice dress on, but your mascara is leaking down your face. She looks physically wretched,
Haggard,
broken, haggard. She looks 10 years older than her days. She ends up being estranged from her son. And again, I won't go into too many plot details in this because it's not like the blockbusters where if you haven't seen them by now, it's not your fault. Nobody saw this film. It's just has this beautiful darkness through it. And in actual fact, it's a strange one because you want her to get her shit together, but at the same time, you don't care because she's so wanton throughout the film. She pushes everybody away almost with the intent, because to let people in would take more work than it is to sustain her addiction. That's the easy path. And some of the positions that she sets herself in, I won't call them heartbreaking, but they're so tragically dangerous. She's lost all respect for herself. She's lost all respect for a normal life. But then when Mark Maron comes into her life, and she treats him like shit, but he lets her because he thinks if he can just show her enough love and understanding, that he can pull her out of it. And and you don't know which way the story's going to go. Let's just say, without saying if it's positive or negative, the final scene in this film, and I don't mind saying I wow cried. I was a fucking wreck, mate. Like literally.
It was powerful.
It wasn't just like wiping my eyes. Oh, that was nice. I was like, that is fucking it, mate. I deserve an Oscar. I wasn't afraid to get ugly. But yeah, I fucking love. I'm just saying, I love this. I do. I love it. I love it. It's not a comfortable watch. It's at best awkward. I could watch this again and again. It's just
definitely. Yeah. I only watched it 2 nights ago. Had I seen it earlier, it would be on my list. But I thought it was just so true to anyone who's either experienced this firsthand themselves or has a loved one who's going through some form of addiction. It's just so true to life. For instance, like when she goes to visit her son and stay in the son's apartment, and then he goes off to work, like immediately the desperation with which she's like checking coins in the seat cushions or the couch, going through pants to see if there's any money left over so she can buy herself a bottle of liquor. The desperation is so true.
Yeah.
What you're saying earlier about an external force. I mean, one thing about this type of situation is that, ironically, it's the people who you are closest to who are in some ways the least capable of helping you through because of the way that the addict has so profoundly damaged those people.
Yeah.
And there's always like, it's so the Marin character, it's just so true to, I in my view, true to life. Like someone who doesn't have that backstory with her, who's able to be patient.
It's spine-tinglingly verisimilitudinous.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Well, I mean, God, that could be an episode in itself, couldn't it, Tim?
All right. Drum roll. My number one for this Oscar year is Red Notice.
Red Notice?
The Rock and Ryan Reynolds.
They weren't in Barbarian, Tim.
I'm obviously fucking with you. Barbarian, baby. Yes. Number one. Oh, we've already handled that one, so, but yeah, I love that.
You can say a little, you can just,
One thing we didn't say is like, oftentimes with horror movies, you can watch them once because they're dependent on jump scares. And once you see the jump scare, you know it, right? But this is not dependent on that. This is something you can watch several times and get more out of it. So I love this movie, obviously.
Have you got an idea what my last film is? My number one.
No, not really.
Oscar cycle for 2022 stroke 23. Okay, this film it's another from A24. It's Oscar nominated Paul Mescal, and it's one of the most succinctly understated films I've ever seen. Frankie Corio should feel himself very unlucky. I actually feel that the Oscar should have a category for young actor. I think if we're splitting it by the sexes, we should have a young performance as well. It's as separate and diverse as male and female. I think there should be a young category, which absolutely should not exclude them from being in the best of category as well. The film is called After Sun. It's one of the most patiently depictions of a man's struggle with mental health. A young father is taking his tween daughter on holiday, and he's kind of estrayed from her, and he doesn't see as often as he probably should do. And it doesn't play to the, well, you're never there, all very quiet. When there is butting of heads, it feels very, very realistic. It's about the silly things, you know, how a father may want to do one thing, but the kid wants to do another. He actually gives Frankie Corio's character a lot of space and trusts her. She's a sensible young lady. Well, not young lady, a sensible girl. What it does so clever is it puts her in situations that are perilous. There's a tension that runs through the film because of how quietly spoken it is. You're always waiting for the tragedy. You're waiting for that right turn. Because of that, I'm so glad that it never takes the opportunity to have that one singular event that turns this film into something else, because it redirects slowly the focus onto Paul Mescal's crumbling mental state. And a lot like To Leslie, this is the perfect depiction of how the public persona of somebody that is really struggling internally, that you can keep that facade up, that you can make everybody think everything's all right. And then the quiet moments on his own, there's these nostalgic rave sequences where he's in this euphoric state, letting go. And you don't know if it's longing for the past. Is this just showing the extremity of what he's going through mentally? All very in the eye of the viewer. The way it ends the film, so powerfully quiet, but you just know. So powerful. Paul Mescal, for him to get that Oscar nomination, when I saw his name, that was the one that I punched the air. And again, right age for the X-Men. We might. Same with Frankie Corio as well.
I think we found our Cyclops.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, Cyclops. I was thinking Cyclops and Frankie Corio would make a great honey badger.
Yeah.
No,
I got to see this.
I loved it. Loved it. So that's that.
It really is a good year. It really was a good year.
Yeah, I just want to recap my list from 20 to 1. And Weird Al, Chippendale, Emily the Criminal, Black Phone, Glass Onion, Vengeance, Fresh, Men, Cyrano, Bodies, 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 Terrifier 2, All Quiet on the Western Front, Top Gun Maverick, The Northman, Batman, Barbarian, Boiling Point, Banshees of Inisherin, To Leslie, After Sun. What that shows me is the array of different types of film, the array of different studios, the array of different types of performances. And also, there's films on Tim's list that I haven't seen. There's films on my list that Tim hasn't seen. And some of them are quite high up the list. If you're willing to go out there and find these films, it's in as healthy a state as I've ever known.
Completely agree. Megan, The Menu, Men, Multiverse of Madness, the Doctor Strange movie, The Whale, Nope, Black Phone, Violent Night, Smile, Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, Pearl, Vengeance, Bodies, 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 The Northman, X, Top Gun Maverick, Cyrano, Banshees of Inisherin, Barbarian. One thing we talked about is just how chock full both our lists are with horror movies. That's where a lot of the auteur innovations are happening.
Yeah. So let's wrap it up there, Tim.
Yes, goodbye, loyal listeners and first-time listeners. I hope you enjoyed the list. We had fun putting them together.
Indeed, we did. So goodbye from Tim. Goodbye from me, your enthusiastic as ever co-host, Matt. Again, if you've made it through to this far, please subscribe, please like, please share. Or even if you didn't like it, just do it anyway. I mean, what's your fucking problem, mate? Hey, what's your problem? Let's just get those boxes ticked. Visit us on YouTube. Visit us on Instagram. Visit us on Twitter. And that only leaves me one thing to say. We have been, and this is the end.
Bravo.